And good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us right now on our first show of 2019. Happy New Year to everyone. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started right now. First up, as a special form of closing out 2018, we are going to recap some of the most memorable trials from the past year, and we're also going to be previewing trials that are coming up in 2019. First up on the docket today, we're going to be recapping the Riley Gaul case, the William Riley Gaul case. You might remember that he was charged with the shooting death of his 16-year-old girlfriend, Emma Walker. In the 11 a.m. hour, we're going to go over to Wisconsin and cover the trial, recap the trial of George Birch, who is charged with the murder of Nicole Vanderheiden. 12 p.m., we're going to be covering the infamous case of Claude Tex MacGyver. Was that murder or was it an accident? 2 p.m., we're going to cover the Daniel Villegas case, and we all know that had one of the most dramatic conclusions we've ever seen in a courtroom. And finally, we're going to end out the day at 3 p.m. with the trial of Quentin Tellis, the murder mystery of what happened to Jessica Chambers. She was brutally killed by being burned alive. The question is, was Quentin Tellis the person who really did this? We'll have to recap it and figure it out. Okay, so these are really the trials that we are going to be covering, but let's just talk about 2019 for a second. We have a lot of trials coming up, so let's start right now with one of the biggest ones we're going to be covering, and that, of course, is the McStay family murder. We are going to be covering opening statements January 7th, or we're planning to. Now, this is a very interesting case. Charles Chase Merritt is charged with the 2010 killings of 4 members of the McStay family. That's Joseph McStay, who was 40 years old, his wife Summer, who was 43 years old, and their 2 children, Gianni, 4 years old, and Joseph Jr., who is 3 years old. Their bodies were discovered in 2 shallow graves in the Mojave Desert, and prosecutors believe the motive behind this was financial gain, that the defendant was heavily in debt, and that he had a gambling problem and really struck out at his former business partner, a former business associate, Joseph McStay, and he tried to do this for financial gain. Really intense case. We plan to be live in that courtroom on January 7th, and of course we'll give you any updates that we have about that trial. I want to move, though, now into more future trials that we have coming up very recently, and of course I want to start right now with Joseph Minnell. This is out of New Jersey, and we expect opening statements tomorrow. Joseph Minnell is charged with the murder of his wife, Tara O'Shea Watson, by allegedly stabbing her to death. Prosecutors say that he stabbed her at least 48 times. A manhunt lasted for 2 weeks before he was finally apprehended. Her body was discovered by the couple's 12-year-old son. The state will most likely argue that Minnell physically abused his wife for years, and she had taken out restraining orders before her death. Really interesting case, kind of reminiscent of other trials that we've covered here on the network. Want to move on right now to the Jason Dalton trial. Now, this one is bizarre. This is out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. Jury selection, we believe, is going to continue on Thursday. We expect openings on Monday. Jason Dalton is charged with 6 counts of murder and 2 counts of attempted murder in really a horrific shooting spree that claimed the lives of 6 people. And police say that Dalton, confessed to the crimes and claimed that a demonic force popped up on his Uber app. Remember, he was an Uber driver, and that this sort of led him into why he committed these killings. But here's the thing. A court in Michigan just determined that those statements that he may have made to police will be suppressed. They will not be allowed to be admitted into trial. So it's a very interesting predicament for the state in which way they'll move. There's a lot of moving parts in that trial, and a very interesting trial to cover nonetheless. And finally, I want to talk about a trial that we will be covering that we actually covered once before, but it ended in a mistrial. And this is the Melanie Eam case. We expect opening statements on Monday as well. She is a 22-year-old girl who is going to be on trial for the second time for the killing of her boyfriend, James Barry. And he was 21 years old at the time of her death. She is accused of stabbing him repeatedly, and the defense in the first trial basically said that she wasn't the killer, that it could have been somebody else. As I said, this first trial ended in a mistrial. Jurors deadlocked. They couldn't decide one way or another. 4 jurors said that they favored conviction for second-degree murder, and the other 2 said that they were in favor of the lesser count of manslaughter, a 6-panel jury right there. So it's not that they thought that she was not guilty. They just couldn't decide what level of guilt she would pass there. Okay, so these are some of the trials that we are going to be covering in 2019, but those aren't the only trials that we're covering in 2019. Here's a short report about what else to expect in the upcoming year.
I'm Anthony Velez, and here are the top upcoming trials of 2019. The quadruple homicide trial of Charles Chase Merritt, the man accused of fatally beating a business associate, his wife, and their 2 preschool children, is set to begin on January 7, 2019. The 61-year-old suspect is facing charges in connection to the disappearance of business associate Joseph McStay, his wife, Summer, and their young sons, 4-year-old Gianni and 3-year-old Joey Jr., from their home in Fallbrook in 2010. The family's remains were discovered in the Mojave Desert in 2013, and Merritt was arrested in 2014. Merritt represented himself for a short period, but later sought legal assistance. Merritt now faces the death penalty if convicted. The trial of the retired Tampa police captain who claims he fatally shot another man in self-defense during a dispute at a movie theater is scheduled to begin on February 25, 2019. 75-year-old Curtis Reeves reportedly fatally shot Chad Olson inside the Cobb Grove 16 after the 2 men argued over Olson's use of a cell phone during previews. Olson allegedly approached Reeves and threw a bag of popcorn at him before Reeves drew his gun and fatally shot Olson. Reeves tried to claim a stand your ground defense, but a judge rejected the defense argument, and that decision was upheld on appeal. His defense team will reportedly argue self-defense at trial. Reeves is now facing a second-degree murder charge. The trial of the Georgia man accused of killing an 11th grade history teacher in Ocilla is set to begin in April 2019. The defendant, Ryan Duke, was arrested in 2017 in connection with Tara Grinstead's 2005 disappearance and death. Duke and another man, Bo Dukes, reportedly told friends at a party a month after Grinstead's disappearance that they killed Grinstead and burned her body. Duke now faces multiple charges, including felony murder. Bo Dukes faces charges of concealing a death, tampering with evidence, and hindering the apprehension or punishment of a criminal. A man accused of killing his pregnant ex-girlfriend and a police officer who tried to arrest him in Florida will stand trial in May. Marquis Floyd is accused of fatally shooting his ex-girlfriend, Sade Dixon, on December 10, 2016, before shooting Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton when she tried to arrest him in January 2017. Lloyd reportedly lost the use of one of his eyes while being apprehended by authorities, claiming he suffered an unprovoked police attack. Lloyd now faces the death penalty. The trial of Pan Hupp, the woman accused of killing a mentally disabled man in Missouri to cover up another murder in 2011, is set to begin in June. Prosecutors claim Hupp fatally shot 33-year-old Louis Gumpenberger to divert attention for the murder of Betsy Faria, whose husband, Russ Faria, she framed for the killing in 2011. Hupp was the star witness in Faria's first murder trial, resulting in a guilty verdict. Faria was later acquitted during a second trial. Hupp now faces a charge of first-degree murder for Gumpenberger's killing. The 2 suspects, accused of killing a Florida State law professor in a murder-for-hire plot in 2014, will face a jury in June 2019. The suspects, Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbanua, reportedly hired a hitman, Luis Rivera, who allegedly drove from Miami to Tallahassee and fatally shot Dan Markle. Rivera took a plea deal to a lesser charge of second-degree murder in exchange for his testimony against Garcia and Magbanua. Investigators believe the suspects were hired by Markle's ex-wife's family to kill Markle over a custody dispute, but no family members have been charged. The suspects now face charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder. The ex-wife of NBA star Lorenzo Wright is set to stand trial for his murder in November 2019. Shira Wright and her cousin, Billy Turner, are accused of conspiring to kill Wright in 2010 when Wright's body was found with multiple gunshot wounds in Tennessee. The pair allegedly had a co-conspirator, Wright's cousin, convicted killer Jimmy Martin, who allegedly assisted with the cleanup of the crime scene. Martin turned state's witness, leading investigators to the murder weapon, which was tossed in a lake in Walnut, Michigan. Wright now faces a charge of first-degree murder, but won't face the death penalty if convicted. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime, and those were the top upcoming trials of 2019.
All right, thanks, Anthony. A lot to cover in 2019. But before we go to our break, I want to give you an update out of Colorado. You know the case of Kelsey Bereth, who disappeared about a month ago, this 29-year-old mother who had a 1-year-old daughter. Well, prosecutors have just filed formal criminal charges against Patrick Frazee, her fiancé. He has been charged with 3 counts of solicitation to commit murder and 2 counts of murder, which is interesting because investigators have not said exactly the specifications of their allegations against Mr. Frazee. It could be that he committed the murder himself, or maybe hired someone to do it. This is very interesting, and their updates have been coming out of Colorado about what actually happened to Kelsey Bereth. Her body has not been found, but clearly investigators believe that she is no longer alive, and they believe that Mr. Frazee is the one responsible. As soon as we have more information about that case, we'll make sure to let you know. In the meantime, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to start with the trial of William Riley Gaul. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. Now, how can we not talk about some of the most memorable trials of 2018 without talking about the William Riley Gaul case? This young man who was charged with multiple counts, including first-degree murder in connection with the shooting death of his ex-girlfriend, Emma Jane Walker. She was only 16 years old when she was shot and killed inside of her bedroom. Prosecutors allege that he stole his grandfather's gun, went outside of her house, and fired into her bedroom, ultimately killing her. Now, the question is not whether or not he did this. The question is, was this murder? While prosecutors say this was an intentional killing, the defense said he didn't intend to kill her, but merely wanted to get her attention, wanted to come as her savior, that this was a bad breakup and really just with a tragic result. But that's me discussing the case. Let's start right now with the prosecution's opening statement.
But in the next, between 11:40, when he first starts calling her, that first 14-minute call, until about 12:09, the last call that Emma receives, and or text, there's about 64 different either text, SMS, voice calls, missed calls, etc. 64, back to back to back to back to back to back to back. And he's saying things like, in his text, Emma, I'm begging. At 12:09:39, I'm begging. 12:03:47, please God answer. 12:03:50, please, I'm begging you. This is 3 hours before he kills her. 12:03:57, I ain't hurt like this. 12:04:01, please just talk to me. This is from Mac's phone to Emma's. 12:04:04, please. 12:04:40, please. 12:06:06, please. 12:06:10, don't do this, I can't. 12:06:28, please. And that's about 10 or 12 calls, and so there's a total of 64 communications and another 40 attempted phone calls, including the 14-minute one that we connected.
So you're getting a kind of a sense of the relationship between the defendant and the victim. Let's move now on to the defense's opening statement and see how they did.
The way this is going to work for you, the state makes their opening statements, we make our opening statements. They have the burden of proof, so they have to do that part first. Then they start calling witnesses. We examine those witnesses. In my cross-examination, we may introduce some exhibits to their witnesses, and then they call another witness, and we go through that process. And you're not to make a decision until after you heard all of the evidence. Everyone. From everybody. And even when you heard the evidence, then we get back up and we'll argue. Alan will go first. He represents the state Tennessee. He has the burden of proof. I go second. Because he has the burden, then he does what's called a rebuttal argument. Another thing that Mr. Merritt said was this relationship was a tumultuous relationship. I think somebody described it as a pretty crazy relationship. But I think what the evidence will show you is that this was a very on and off relationship. And Mr. Allen's correct. These two individuals would say they're blocking each other, not block each other, talk, block. And there are. I didn't know how much information can be on a cell phone until this case. The numbers of text messages, the numbers of calls, the numbers of images is enormous. I think Ms. Martin would agree with that. But nonetheless, there was this old and older communications of these two young children. In August of 2016,
all right, let's get some analysis of this case right now. Joining us is Law and Crime trial analyst, first guest of 2019, Jonna Spilbor. Jonna, great to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Jesse. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So we're listening to this case. The idea that the defense seems to be putting is that, hey, he's not his girlfriend's killer. He wanted to be her hero. He wanted to get attention. What do you think about that?
Yeah, this case is sad on so many levels. I mean, first of all, we're dealing with a couple of kids. I know that he was 18 at the time that he committed this crime. She was only 16, but at 18, I don't think, especially a male brain, is not fully matured. Let's say that. Anyhow, but the problem with this defense is if they're going to try to get a jury to believe that Riley Gaul only wanted to scare her, there are far better ways to do it, Jesse, than shooting into a bedroom in the middle of the night where she lay sleeping and defenseless.
Well, if you listen to the prosecution's case, this guy was not all there. I mean, he had this plot where he thought he was going to be kidnapped, right? Wasn't that one of the ways he tried to pretend that he was kidnapped to get her attention?
Yeah, to get her attention. I mean, look, teenagers in love, they fall in, they fall out, they do a lot of crazy things. This is beyond that. Although the defense, make no mistake, this is not an insanity defense by any stretch. This is actually a very technical defense that the defense wants to mount, that the intent to murder was not there.
Because he allegedly shot these bullets from outside of the home into her bedroom, which would suggest if you really wanted to kill her, wouldn't have been another way to do it, as opposed to that seems to be taking a kind of risk. It doesn't seem to be intentional. That's what the defense could argue.
A very large risk, but don't forget, he's also charged here with felony murder, and the felony murder rule is a very weird construct in the law that sort of removes the element of intent if you are in the commission of any felony when somebody gets killed.
And here you could argue the aggravated stalking is that felony.
Exactly.
Because he was also charged with stalking, felony murder, first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, reckless endangerment, and possessing a firearm charge. Right. They threw everything at this guy.
You know, and as they should. This is such a tragedy that was easily preventable. So I don't blame the prosecution sometimes I'm very critical that prosecutors overcharge, not in this case.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, clearly, in this case. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our recap of the William Riley Gaul trial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're covering some of the most memorable trials of 2018, and how could we not talk about the trial of William Riley Gaul, the young man who was charged with killing his ex-girlfriend, Emma Jane Walker, who was only 16 years old when she was gunned down. Now, one of the things we have to analyze is this relationship between William Riley Gaul and Miss Walker. And one of the best witnesses we saw was Jill Walker. This was Emma's mother, who took the stand and explained a little bit more about their toxic relationship. Take a look.
I guess he was kind of playing the bows.
Okay. And you took, of course, whose side of that?
Emma's.
Okay. And so the falling out, the relationship, is that the beginning of the falling out in terms of what you found?
How you treat someone.
Okay. And at some point, do you monitor your child in any particular way in terms of seeing what she's doing?
I mean, yes, I mean, as a parent of teenagers, check text, monitor things, see what's going on.
Okay. And so did you do that on a regular basis?
Yes.
Leading up to the fall of when, or rather his graduation in that summer, had you been regular about checking texts and communication?
Yes.
And did you become concerned about those types of things?
Yes.
Tell us why.
Just some of the language and the way that she was spoken to, we didn't feel it was appropriate. to speak to anyone like that. I felt like some things were not, he didn't respect us as parents. When we said no, we meant no.
Okay. And so what did you do as a result to try and parent your child with regard to her relationship with Riley Gaul?
We tried to discourage her from seeing him. Sometimes you have to give and take a little bit. So we would set limits on how and they could see each other.
Jonna, Jill Walker, she couldn't imagine that even in a bad relationship, she'd be sitting in this courtroom today about what she's testifying to.
Oh, no, your heart has to go out to her as the mother of this young victim. And even more so because right now she's explaining how they tried to discourage or dissuade this relationship because they saw it going down a bad path. But
yeah. I mean, we see that a lot in relationships in these kinds of cases, but who knows what could actually ultimately happen here, you know?
You never expect this ultimate tragedy.
No, and let's play a little bit more of her testimony from this trial.
She was just, we had gotten up and I had followed her to work and we had gone to eat breakfast before she went.
Why'd you follow her to work?
I was just worried about the events that had happened that weekend.
Pursuant to your conversation?
Yes.
Okay. And with regard to that shift, what was her shift that day?
It was either from 12 to 5 or 1 to 5.
Okay. And what happened at the end of her shift?
Her dad, Mark, went to wait until she got off to follow her home.
Okay. And what's the morning routine or morning schedule?
I get ready and pack their lunches and make breakfast for them before they get up.
Okay. And did you do that this morning?
Yes, I was getting her up earlier than normal that morning.
How come?
She wanted to wash her hair.
She liked her hair?
She liked her hair. She had lots of hair.
Yes. And so what time was the plan for her to wash her hair?
I was getting her up at 6:15.
Okay. And did you do so?
And while I went in her room.
Well, tell the members of the jury, when you went in her room at 6:15, what'd you do?
And tried to wake her up.
How so?
I touched her on her legs, tried to wake her up. And normally she wakes up pretty quickly, or will make us, or a grunt or something when I wake her up. And there was no response. And so I went over to her shoulder and said, Emma, and then there was no response. So I was checking for a pulse, and there was no response. She was unresponsive.
Could you see what was wrong?
I couldn't tell what was wrong.
Okay. And what did you do next?
And I called 911.
And did you go back in the room after that initial time?
Yes.
Okay. What for?
Just to make sure there wasn't anything I could do. Describe
how you saw your daughter that morning.
She was laying on her back. Her tongue was out of her mouth. I noticed something on the bed. I thought that was she'd gotten sick or was vomit. I wasn't sure. But she looked like she was sleeping.
What were you thinking? What's wrong?
I had no idea.
And what did you tell 911?
That she was just unresponsive.
You know, Jonna, one of the most startling things about this case, and as you listen to Jill Walker, is the idea that this happened in their home. This happened in their childhood home. This happened in her bedroom. So, you know, as a way of safety, it couldn't get any more worse than that.
No, in the middle of the night, and the parents apparently slept through it and then discovered this the next day. It's just an incredible tragedy. It
is a tragedy, and whether you believe the prosecution, you believe the defense or not, the clear answer is that she was killed. The question is, we know who did the firing. The question is, what was the motivation? Was this an attempt to get her attention, or was this an intentional killing? Based upon her testimony and this rocky relationship, if you're sitting on the jury, what are you starting to think about now?
This is what you're starting to think. Why on earth would a young man intentionally fire a gun? Now, we know that the defense is going to say he didn't intend to kill her. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he intentionally went over there with a loaded gun, pulled pulled the trigger. Not only that, he had to steal the gun first in order to get over there with a loaded gun and pull the trigger.
The idea of this staged kidnapping to get her to come out of a house, the text messages where it seems to be he's obsessed with her. I'm curious, does that help his case or hurt his case if he's saying this wasn't intentional?
I'm saying it hurts it because it doesn't put him in a very good frame of mind.
Interesting. Okay, we'll see which way it goes. We've got a lot more to talk about. So when we come back, we're going to move on to the friends of these two and see what they knew about this situation before the shooting. We'll be right back. So Riley Gaul's outside of this person's house on the driveway, pretending that he got kidnapped in an effort to get his ex-girlfriend, Emma Jane Walker, outside of the house. This is according to Zach Green, one of her friends. Pretty strange. Let's listen to Max Bacon, who was also there, to describe the next series of events. Take a look.
And did you get close enough to hear what was being said?
Yes, sir.
And what was Riley Gaul saying?
So when we got down there, I think they'd already been talking for a moment, and Emma was saying, "So are you telling me that you were kidnapped?" And
Okay, and what was Riley saying?
he said, "I don't know where I am, and my head hurts."
Okay. And were their voices normal or raised?
Raised, he was kind of upset.
Okay. And what did Emma tell him after that?
I'm tired of stuff like this. I can't do this stuff like this anymore.
And how did he react to that?
He just got more angry and confused.
If you had to characterize how upset she was, how would you characterize that?
She was incredibly distraught. Violently sobbing.
How long did it take her to calm down?
20 or 30 minutes or so.
And who was comforting her?
Okay, let's break this down right now. Jonna, have you ever heard of a situation quite like this, almost an elaborate kidnapping that he's wanted to get the attention of his ex-girlfriend? I mean, he's sitting out on the driveway, but he's not really hurt.
Not exactly like that, but it is quite common for people, especially people who are uncomfortable being broken up or out of a relationship, to kind of do things that are not in their normal course of business, things that are very unusual in order to get the attention of their unrequited love.
Now, you said before evidence like this, of the text messages, the obsession, it would hurt his case, but couldn't you look at it as the other way and say he was obsessed with her, he loved her, he would never do anything, he just wanted her attention, he fired a gun into the house not knowing that he'd kill her just to get her attention, be her hero?
So I agree with you up to the point where he actually fires the gun, because think about it, there must be at least one parent on that jury, right? So of course, is it normal, let me put it in air quotes, for teenagers to incessantly text each other, whether they're mad, whether they're in love, out of love, whatever? Yes. But you see this escalation of the text, and then the weird kidnapping thing, and then ultimately shooting inside her bedroom in the middle of the night, Jesse. Her bedroom. It wasn't the living room. It wasn't the kitchen. It was her bedroom in the middle of the night where he was certain she was going to be asleep and defenseless.
You know, John, that's a great point, because if he wanted to get her attention, the argument is he could have fired in the air, could have fired in the ground. There was other areas. Why fire?
Knock on the door.
Right, knock on the door. Why fire right into the bedroom? Right. And one of the discussion we're going to have a little bit later is he knew about that bedroom, and it's likely he knew where she was sleeping and where her head would be on that bed. That becomes a big point for the prosecution. When we come back, though, we're going to move into testimony about who may have seen William Riley Gaul, or someone maybe that was not William Riley Gaul, in this area, this vicinity at the time of the shooting. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned here on Law and Crime. And welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us here on a day where we're recapping some of the most memorable trials from 2018. And let's get started back with the trial we're covering right now. So we are focusing on the William Riley Gaul trial. This man was charged with the murder of Emma Jane Walker, his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend. It was alleged that he stole his grandfather's gun, went over to her house, and shot inside of her bedroom from outside the home, ultimately killing her. And that's where I want to move right now, into the testimony of James Walker. This is the defendant's grandfather, who will explain a little bit more about William Riley Gaul and what happened that night. Take a look.
But you, prior to him going to Maryville College, That you were aware, obviously, that Riley had a girlfriend, right?
Correct.
And what was her name?
Miss Emma.
Miss Emma, that's what you called her? Miss Emma? Okay. And her name is Walker, like yours? And you're no relation to Emma Walker, right? Or the Jill and Mark Walker, everyone? Okay. And when was the next time? Obviously, the next day would be the Saturday. When was the next time that you saw Noah or Riley?
I believe I got over to Noah's around 7:30, 7 o'clock.
Is this Saturday night?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Saturday night, who all convenes there at Noah's?
The same people. Me, Noah, Walton, Alex, Kendall, Riley.
Okay. And at some point, does Riley leave to go to a convenience store with anybody?
Yes, sir. I was not told that he was going to the convenience store. Instead, he asked me to step out and speak with him about something, and I declined. I was still upset with him for essentially telling us that he got kidnapped, so I didn't want to be part of it. Alex was not there not before. Alex stepped out with him. He agreed to step out and talk with him. It was very calm.
Let's try to make sense of this right now with Law&Crime trial analyst Jonna Spilbor. Seems like a powder keg waiting to blow, you know, and the signs are really bad. Now, we can't forget, though, that he's not just charged with murder, he's charged with aggravated stalking. Is this stalking?
Oh, I would say absolutely, because he's showing up wherever she is uninvited. Now, here's the thing, which could take it a little bit out of stalking. She has to be aware that he's present so that she is in some sort of fear for her physical safety. Typically, most stalking statutes require that. Now, it is apparent that she did know that he was texting her. Somebody answered the door when he sent himself disguised as somebody else to try to pretend that there was some nefarious thing going on. So most likely, I mean, stalking would be the least of his worries if that's all he's convicted of.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Is there a sense that if she at least gave into a little bit, communicating with him, you know, speaking to him, is that hurt the stalking charge?
All right, so that's a very interesting question, because I'll tell you something that you don't know. When I had a stalker, and I did back in law school, the police told me not to respond to him, because the theory is if somebody rings your doorbell 100 times and you answer it on the 101st time, then that person now knows that all they have to do is ring your doorbell 100 times and they're going to get your attention. So I don't think it would have helped her to respond.
I guess that's because, I mean, look, if you have two teenagers who were, you know, dating, they break up, it gets messy, everything could enter into the realm of what's stalking and what's not. But here, I mean, this is a very different set of circumstances.
Yes, and for purposes of felony murder, which is another thing he's been charged with, the stalking will get him there. So will the fact that he's carrying a firearm that he's not authorized to carry on somebody else's private property, and he's been charged with a firearm charge too. So they get there one way or another.
What did you think of the grandfather's testimony about the gun?
All right, so my concern was I'm not quite clear whether he discovered the missing gun before or after the actual killing. It seems like a shame if he had noticed it earlier and had questioned him earlier, or had not believed him when he said Riley didn't have it. Was this another misstep and could have prevented this tragedy?
I'm sure there's a lot of people who were involved in both of their lives wondering if they could have done something to ultimately prevent this. But at the end of the day, William Riley Gaul was on trial, nobody else. That's the important thing to note. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get a little bit more into the testimony and move on to another friend of the defendant. We'll be back.
I'm Dan Abrams, and this is the Law&Crime Network.
The only 24/7 network with expert legal analysis and gavel-to-gavel live trial coverage.
He kissed me goodbye on the cheek. That was the last time we saw him.
From high-profile cases to the most compelling local trials.
You didn't expect her. Let me finish.
We cover the most interesting and important legal news going on across the country.
The former officer took The Stand.
And our multi-platform brand is resonating. From syndication.
With more, we're joined by Law and Crime Network host Jesse Weber.
To our expert analysis.
With me now is Rachel Stockman, editor-in-chief for Law and Crime Network.
This former head prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, and host of Law and Crime Network, Bob Bianchi.
On Monday, the Law and Crime Network covering the trial live.
Let's get to the top legal stories of the day with Jesse Weber, attorney and anchor for the Law and Crime Network. So good morning, Jesse.
With dozens of places to watch, we already have tens of millions of minutes viewed per month. And our viewers and readers are engaged, with more than 30,000 comments per month on the site, a bustling chat room, and an average watch time of 30 minutes.
Womanizer, that's fine. It doesn't make me guilty of solicitation of capital murder.
In the fastest growing genre in America, we are uniquely positioned to dominate. This is Law and Crime.
In every family, small conversations can make a big impact. I grew up on tour with my parents. Kind of different, but we bonded over music just like other families do over sports, camping, or other interests. And we talked. Little everyday conversations from silly to serious that built a foundation over time. Honest conversations, like when my dad shared his experiences as an alcoholic.
Your honesty about that part of your life gave me a sense of integrity that I wanted to uphold in my own life. And I was so grateful that you and Mom had become these sober, stable people who were always there for me.
I wanted you to know from someone who's been in recovery more than 30 years now that hard work is what creates success, not alcohol or other drugs, whether it's music or anything else. I said it a lot, and I'm glad you took it to heart.
Talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Matthew.
I know that a lot of times, Mom, it might not seem like I'm listening to you, but I am. And what you say really does matter to me.
All the talks we've had over the years, including what you've told me about not using alcohol and other drugs, they stick with me, and they make a difference, especially at times that matter most.
Hey, want a drink?
No thanks, I'm good. So thank you, Dad, for preparing me for what's ahead.
Talk, they hear you.
Welcome back, everybody. We're recapping one of the most memorable trials of 2018, the William Riley Gaul trial, the man who was charged with the murder of his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. Where we last left off, we were listening to testimony about the bizarre behavior of the defendant leading up to the shooting, including that he tried to stage a kidnapping in order to lure the attention of Emma, to get out of her house that she was at, a friend's house, in order to get her out so she could talk to him. But as you know, one of the allegations was that he stole his grandfather's gun, and it was that gun that he allegedly used to kill Emma. I want to move right now into Alex McCarthy's testimony. This is a friend of the defendant who will explain that William Riley Gaul confessed to him to stealing the gun. Take a look at his reaction.
We moved this in as surveillance video pilot 9 minutes after midnight on November 20th. Alex McCarthy. And so in that trip to pilot is the conversation that we're talking about where he's telling you about the kidnapping and those types of things? Okay. When you arrive back from the pilot, do you continue to talk with him?
Yeah, a lot of conversation kept going.
All right. Tell the members of the jury what he did during that conversation. What he
told me he was concerned so much about his safety that he had stolen his grandfather's gun, and he showed it to me, pulled it out from the driver's side area.
Okay. He had it concealed in the car somewhere?
Yes.
Okay, and he pulled it out from where?
His driver's side area. I don't remember specifically to the side, maybe in the seat. It was on his side for sure.
Okay, and he pulls it out, and what does he do with the gun?
Shows it to me. I guess just like kind of a story about how scared he was and whatever about these people.
Okay. And do you recognize the gun? Do you know what kind of gun it is?
Yeah, I mean, since, I've seen guns very similar to it. It was a Glock 9mm.
Okay. And did he hand it to you?
No. Yes. Yeah, he did.
That night?
I did hold it, yeah, that night.
Okay.
Tim told me that he didn't know if it was loaded or not, and not to touch it or anything like that.
Okay. Are you familiar with firearms?
No, sir.
Okay, so do you know what a clip is in a gun?
Yes.
A magazine?
Yeah.
Could you tell whether the clip was in it?
No, not specifically.
Saturday night, you're not sure?
No.
Okay. And so, as a result of that conversation, do you go back, or after that conversation, do you go back inside?
Yes.
And anything else that he told you out there in the car that concerned you?
No, I mean, honestly, it got to the point where I was just kind of rambling and just like trying to talk to him. So my first thought was that he was suicidal and would like hurt himself. And so I just kind of started talking to him, like pep talk almost, just telling him to come around and just using a rut. But
But none of the words that he was telling you, these reasonings that he was giving you for having taken his grandfather's gun, none of those were in the nature of suicide. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. They were, or they?
No, it's fair to say that they weren't.
He was protecting himself.
Yeah.
That's interesting that this friend thought that he was suicidal, but clearly there were no signs that he was suicidal, but he was up to something.
No, but I guess it makes it even more scary when he steals his grandfather's gun, because now I suppose if somebody were aware of that, they wouldn't know if he's planning to use it on himself or somebody else.
Were you surprised that the defense didn't move into some sort of argument other than he was just a love-struck kid? I mean, it seems like there was some sort of psychological issue happening here.
You know, and I thought about that, Jesse. I'm like, why didn't the defense try to mount an official insanity defense? And I think when you look at the facts that we do know about this case, clearly the defendant knew the difference between right and wrong. I don't think he lost. Those synapses were firing, and perhaps that's why they chose, not to do that.
That's a great point. Seemed like he knew what he was doing. Let's move back to Alex McCarthy, who's going to describe a little bit more about how the defendant continued to try to cover up the crime. Take a look.
Getting rid of the gun by yourself with him? Okay. And so what was his response when you told him that you wanted Noah to participate in getting rid of the gun?
He was immediately really hesitant, but he didn't try to break off from the plan or anything. When he went to Noah's house, whenever we got there, he asked me to come outside by myself and talk to him in the car for a minute before we went inside, and that's when he was asking me what is he thinking? And I was like, no man, he thinks the same things to me, just here to help.
Okay. And so where is it that you guys convene to start this plan? How does Riley get there? And about what time does the plan to get rid of the gun start?
No, it was dark already. It was a little later.
Okay. Had Alan Merritt, the Sheriff's Department, given you some recording devices at this point?
Yeah, we went prior to leaving Noah's house, so yes.
Okay. And did you turn those recording devices on?
Yes, sir.
And so you and Noah are there at the house. You talk to Riley outside. Does Riley eventually make his way inside?
Yeah. Well, me and I go and do that after he told me to come outside, and then we got there, and I talked to him in his car for a minute, and then we went inside together.
Okay. Is that the first stop you make on Plummer?
First stop we make.
All right. Go ahead and tell the members of the jury about that. On your way from Noah's house, you have to stop on Plummer?
To pick up what Riley says is the gun.
Okay, and describe that circumstance of how that happens. You pull up, you go into Seth's house? Or?
We did not park at a church across kind of the street. It's like across the street down a little bit. And we parked in the back, and Riley said he would come back with the gun.
Okay, and did he come back with more than the gun?
Yes, he came back with a trash bag full.
Okay. And did he tell you what the trash bag was for?
He just said that he picked up a random trash bag and he just stuffed it in it.
Okay. At some point, are you able to see the contents of that bag?
I could see when he was opening it, when we had a ride finally at the Bluffs. It looked just like a lot of black clothes and he had a pair of white gloves.
Okay. And with regard to the trash bag, where did he place it during the travel?
Between his legs.
Okay. And so you said Noah was communicating with the police department or the sheriff's department on his phone in the back seat?
Yes.
Okay, Jonna, what you seem to be getting from this line of testimony and other friends that have testified, and again, they wore a recording device to capture what William Riley Gaul, they said, was not telling the truth. They might have, he said, oh, I first had the gun because I wanted to protect myself. Then it seemed that he was asking for them to lie and to help ditch the weapon, and things took a different turn. Why did he ask one of his friends to see if he could get fingerprints removed? Why was he trying to get rid of the gun? Why did he say that I was going to be convicted of something I didn't do? So he buried himself throughout this whole case.
Yeah, he did. And again, it's another example of the escalation. And the fact, what we talked about before that clip was why wasn't there an insanity defense mounted, which was one of my questions. And that explains it. Because clearly somebody who's asking friends to help him get rid of evidence knows that what he did was wrong. And then that just kind of takes the wind out of your sails for an insanity
And he
defense.
probably didn't imagine that he would be talking to his friends and they were secretly recording him.
No, nobody ever imagines that. But, you know, that's, again, the least of his worries, because there was so much other evidence of his guilt that this is just a little bit of the icing on the cake, so to speak.
And talking of that recording, we're going to take a break. We're going to play you some of the recording of the defendant talking about what happened. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back.
They haven't released anybody. People just make up shit because they want me to be paid. Well, how did they work? How did they tell you? Did they tell you? Like the detective you talked to? I asked them at the very beginning of the interrogation, I said, do you guys know anything about how she died? And they said no. But then later on, when all they called me in there to do, I went in there voluntarily. They said they wanted to get a timeline of the weekend, like where I was, what I was doing. Told them every single bit of the honest truth, where I was every moment of the weekend to my best knowledge. Who I was with. I said Saturday. I didn't remember how late you stayed. I said, I'm pretty sure Alex showed up for a little bit. Like he was there for a little bit. Not sure how long he stayed. I know Isaac was there with the girl.
Wow. That was the defendant on a secret recording with whatever they were listening to, just added even more dramatic music to that conversation. But, Jonna, all jokes aside, the audacity to say that Emma killed herself. That's what he's caught on camera saying. Well, she may have killed herself. It's something that me and her parents know.
You know, clearly he's having a little bit of a break with reality when he's trying to convince his friends of this. This is interesting to me, though, for another reason, and that is, A, it shows this is not a sophisticated criminal for what that's worth, but B, he had every right not to say a word, because we all have the Fifth Amendment right not to testify against ourselves at any criminal trial. And this information is how the jury gets to hear from his own words what happened after this crime. It's very chilling.
How many times do you see defendants trying to speak to family and friends about something that happened in an effort to protect themselves, and it backfires like this?
A lot. They try to concoct a story. Like, people don't realize that anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Not just if you're talking to a police officer and you waive your Miranda rights. Anybody you talk to can then become a witness against you.
If you're sitting in the defense, how could you try and keep that tape out?
Oh, and I'm sure they did. I'm sure they filed a motion to suppress. But there really aren't grounds, because it wasn't conducted by police, and he's a defendant in this action. And there really are no legal grounds to not enter it into evidence.
So, in other words, if you commit a crime, be careful who you speak to.
Loose lips sink ships,
yeah,
Jesse.
And again, the question is whether or not this was an intentional killing. Why would he, if he really was obsessed with Emma Walker and loved her and wanted to be a part of her life and was upset that they broke up, why would he want to kill her?
So I suppose maybe that's what the defense sort of wants the jury to believe. But look, this was a kid who, technically a man, who went over there with a deadly weapon, fired it inside a bedroom where a defenseless teenager slept. Obviously, he was upset about the breakup. He wanted to do something more than get her attention, because there are far easier ways to do that.
Yeah, because staging a kidnapping and trying to get her attention didn't quite work out. I'm curious, what avenue do the defense do they need to explore moving forward? Because we're going to still see what they intend to do.
You know, so the defense, I think, really wants the jury to take an X-Acto knife to what the jury instructions are going to be. They're going to try to claim that since he didn't intend to kill her, therefore you can't come back with a murder conviction, maybe something less than murder. And that takes a lot of technical acumen in order to convince a jury to do.
The love-struck kid defense, that this is just a love-struck kid, didn't know what he was doing, he was acting like an idiot, that's going to work?
It doesn't fly when somebody's dead. It just, in my opinion, it's not going to fly.
What happens if they have a really persuasive closing argument?
Still not going to fly.
Well, let's see. When we come back, we're going to play you the closing arguments by both the prosecution and the defense, and we'll see what happened. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. So we're coming to the conclusion of the William Riley Gaul trial. Remember, he was on trial for the murder of Emma Jane Walker, his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend. And the question becomes, was this an intentional killing when he fired that weapon into her bedroom? Or was this merely just an attempt to get her attention and it backfired? Let's start right now with the prosecution's closing argument.
And this obsessiveness of Emma Walker. Mark and Jill and Evan, well, they won't be the same. They are crushed. But you can write that by getting justice for Emma in this case. You also heard from John and Karen Warren and Jill Carney. They put time frames on things for you in this case. John and Karen Warren told you 3 o'clock in the morning. Luckily they were awake and they heard the gunshots. But if you got a sense of John Warren, you also got a sense of loss from him too. When you thought, when you saw the anguish that guy had, a neighbor, just a neighbor, the guilt that he felt that this person creeped into the middle of his neighborhood at 3 o'clock in the morning, wearing all black with a gun. Think about the nature of the bizarre actions that he engaged in. It all began when he stole that gun. Everything started to whirlwind as soon as he got that gun in his hands. Right? Friday afternoon, Jim Walker, gun is missing. Riley, where's the gun? I don't have it, Papa. Deny, deny, deny. And then comes the kidnapping story. Why is that? Because now he's armed with a weapon. And now if he can create this alternative group that's after Emma, and he actually does the attack, he can blame it on somebody else. That's what Friday night's about. You think about the text communication, come outside alone. Come outside.
Strong prosecution closing argument. You see William Riley Gaul with his head down listening to all of it. But let's see what his defense attorney had to say. This is the defense's closing argument.
That is, said Riley appeared disconnected, blank expression, stoic, in shock and crying. Believed Emma was still alive, around, and only hurt. David Wise realizes that Riley doesn't know she's dead. But he doesn't say she's dead. You don't want to disappoint your granddad. And you don't want to disappoint your mother. And you don't want to disappoint your grandmother. 18 years old. That's the responsibility that you see. So what's he?
Okay, that's the defense's. Jonna, before we reveal the verdict, what do you think?
I think it's a mistake to refer to this killing as a, quote, stupid mistake. I really don't think it's going to fly. The jury's not going to believe that an 18-year-old made a stupid mistake that resulted in a bullet going behind some sleeping girl's ear in the middle of the night. That's much more than a stupid mistake. They're not going to buy it.
Good prosecution closing argument right there. Okay, let's see if Jonna was right. Here's the verdict in the William Riley Gaul case.
Mr. Gilder, has the jury reached the verdict? Yes, sir, we have. Will you please stand? Mr. Gaul, please stand. Mr. Gilder, in count one, the first defined offense charging the defendant with first-degree murder. Did the jury reach a verdict?
Yes, we did.
What is your verdict?
Guilty.
Count 2, charging the defendant. The charged offense is especially aggravated stalking. Did the jury reach a verdict?
Yes, we did.
What is your verdict?
Not guilty.
And for the lesser included offense of aggravated stalking, did the jury reach a verdict?
We did.
What is your verdict?
Not guilty.
And for the lesser included offense of stalking, did the jury reach a verdict?
We did.
What is your verdict?
Guilty.
In count 3, charging the defendant with theft, did the jury reach a verdict?
We did.
What is your verdict?
Guilty.
And with respect to the value of the property, did the jury find the property to be worth more than $500 but less than $1,000?
We did.
Very well. And count 4, charging the defendant with tampering with evidence, did the jury reach a verdict?
Okay, William Riley Gaul was found guilty of murder and other charges. He was sentenced to a mandatory life term, and he's going to be eligible for parole after serving 51 years in prison. Jonna, during his sentencing phase, he said, I'm sorry I took Emma away from you. He was speaking to the family of Emma Walker. My intentions were not and never have been to cause physical harm. I wanted to scare her. I loved Emma. What do you make of that?
You know, I'm happy that he at least showed some remorse, but he's living in la-la land if he's convinced himself that he didn't want to kill this teenager at the time, because he did. All of his actions speak otherwise. This, oh, shucks, I didn't mean to kill her defense didn't fly with the jury. It doesn't fly with me. There you have it.
And that's his fate, and what a fate that is, spending basically the rest of his life in prison. Jonna, I know that we have to sign you off, so thanks so much for coming on.
Always a pleasure. I'll see you soon.
This is the start of 2019. You're going to come back on a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Here's what we're going to do. When we come back, we're going to continue our recap of some of the most memorable trials from 2018, and we know where we're going next. We're going into the George Birch trial out of Wisconsin. What a case that was. A murder case about who did it. Was it George Birch, or was it the victim's boyfriend? We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.